Welcome to Celestial Small Talk with Alice
and CJ. Celestial Small Talk refers to the big ideas, profound revelations, and deep connections that are created in the briefest of encounters. It is often in these moments that an imperceptible shift in thought can bring about the biggest change, helping us to more fully embody our intuition. We strive to inspire, illuminate, question, provoke, and spark the unique constellation within. Hello, fellow listeners. Welcome back to Celestial Small Talk with CJ and Alice. Alice, what's going on today?
I have had a pretty decent morning. I was feeling more relaxed this morning, and then some news happened, and I just gotten a wave of overwhelming anxiety that I'm trying to self-soothe at this point. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't know why when I was lighting up the candles before our podcast, I was drawn to the amethyst and the rose quartz that I had on my altars, and I brought them over here just to calm myself down a little bit better.
Well, if we're feeling a little bit anxious, then let's start with a little bit of centering. So everyone who's listening, I invite you to sit into a comfortable position that feels good for you. Maybe roll out your shoulders or your neck. Take a nice deep breath in and exhale it out. And I know one thing that I wanted to focus on for this conversation is the idea of reclaiming joy. So I lit a joy candle, which has a spell along with it saying, "Let me discover pure joy in my being. Allow happiness and laughter to flow freely through my life and into the lives of those around me." So if we can focus in on this idea of joy while taking some nice deep breaths and realizing what is good in our bodies, then hopefully we can progress through this conversation feeling a little less anxious than before.
Thank you so much. What's going on with you today?
Well, I love the fact that the spell includes laughter because I took a big risk last night in doing my very first stand-up set ever. And Alice came out. Thank you, Alice, for coming out and supporting me and recording it, which is great because I was able to share it with people who are not close to me, who felt like they were able to be there for the experience. So I got to learn a lot from seeing other performers, and then seeing myself and hearing myself afterwards was a really great learning experience. So I'm just excited to continue to learn from the process of going through these open mics and doing stand-up, because each time is different and you kind of get new perspective as to how you want your set to go.
I'm so excited for your journey. I just thought, in the moment, if it was me, and I would love for somebody to film this so that I can look back, years from now and says, that was my very first time being on stage with my set. That was my very first set. This was how it went. And I'm so excited for your comedy journey. And I think it's so brave of you to put yourself out there and just have a laugh at things that we get to experience, good or bad.
Right. And a lot of that comes from reflecting on your experiences throughout your life to then be able to share that in a way that might help others identify and hopefully, give a nice chuckle. And so I think that process of introspection actually relates really nicely to what we're going to talk about today, Alice.
Yeah, I recently got a question from one of my dear friends about what to do when she's alone, because she's a single mom and I have so much respect for her. She's a single mom. She's been doing it for 12 years. Her son has autism and she's just been his rock. And I don't know how she did it, but because of that, she doesn't have a lot of alone time. And I always empower her to do more self-care and do more things that make her feel good about herself and embracing her as an individual and not an attachment of someone else. So she was like, okay, now I'm going to do it today. He's in school. I have all these other help. I'm going to take some time for myself today, but what do I do? And I thought that was such an interesting question. And I've been doing this for a while. I live by myself. I also am a single mom. So I've been kind of practicing this for a while. And I thought this is a question that I could probably answer on the podcast, because I'm sure a lot of people wondering how to most effectively utilize their alone time, and the importance of alone time. So yeah, I'm very excited to dive in.
As you were talking, Alice, I was actually shuffling the cards and the sun reversed popped out. And the sun is usually sort of this bright light at the end of the tunnel. You've been through a lot of the toils and tribulations of life, of going through your own personal journey, your journey in relation to other people, to your profession, to your hobbies. And when the sun comes out reversed, it kind of feels like it's a bit of a cloudy day, and maybe that sun is not fully visible to you. When I think about people who have a really hard time with alone time or don't have the opportunity for a lot of alone time, it feels pretty apt that the sun came out reversed, because it kind of shows that inner light isn't really being revealed. You're not able to tap into that joy that does come from within. It's really easy to not know what to do and to not seek out things that are helpful to you. And if you take the time to go through the work and be alone, then you get to come out shining on the other side. So whenever a card comes out reversed, it doesn't always mean that it's the opposite of what the upright meaning is. It could just mean that you're a little stagnated. You're not quite there yet. So with this metaphor of sort of a cloudy day over the sun, it feels pretty appropriate.
That's so interesting, because when I think about alone time, it has a lot to do with the 12th house of hidden matters and introspective and internal psychological world, even self-destructive habits, isolation, meditative state, spiritual practices, mental health. It's just things that are like not visible. And then interestingly enough, it's like the last house, and then goes, it goes back down to the first house, right before the first house of self-identity and body and like visible things, the very first thing about yourself. So I love that it's like right next to that. It's like the sun is right behind the cloud. It's actually really productive time. And you should utilize the time when you're alone, or when you're sort of forced into this state of having to confront your inner critics, or things that you're going through, process these things alone, so that you have more of a conviction of why you do things the way you do, and not be influenced by other people's opinions or societal norms or anything like that.
Yeah, it's very easy to look outside of oneself for validation and for completeness. And what I keep learning and relearning is that everything starts from within. And one thing that I've been trying to get into the habit of is whenever I feel the need for something outside of myself, whether it's the comfort of certain food, or maybe purchasing something that looks beautiful, or doing something that is adventurous, I have to check in with myself and wonder, okay, why am I searching for that outside of myself? What is it that maybe I'm feeling is missing that's causing me to seek that elsewhere? And that's a really hard process to go through, particularly when we don't prioritize that in our lives. And it isn't something that, like you sort of mentioned, like mainstream culture really promotes. It's not something that people are like eager to do, because oftentimes it's just easier to find the other thing and to find the validation elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea, like, especially now with the culture of everything being visible, in the sense that things are on social media. Like back in the day, you don't really know what's going on with your friends if you don't see them, or you don't call them, you don't text them. But now you just see the picture and you're like, okay, that's what's going on with them. It's just a snapshot of whatever they want to share with the world. But now there's an illusion of a reality that doesn't reflect the truth. And because of that, like, especially a lot of people, especially the younger generations, they felt like this is reality because this is all sort of everywhere that they see, and they live next to their phone all the time, because they feel like this is what they need to do. Lived experience have to be shared in order for it to be valid. you have to have a certain amount of likes. If you don't have likes or views, then maybe you're not relevant. And relevant seems to equal worth, but that's not the truth, right? Because your worth has nothing to do with how relevant you are to other people. It's only a matter of how relevant you are to your own journey.
So, as you were talking about this idea of sharing everything on social media and people really being absorbed by that, I was shuffling the cards and the Four of Cups came out reversed. So, it's interesting that I'm getting a whole bunch of reversed cards because usually that means that we haven't quite attained that level yet. And the idea behind the Four of Cups is this idea of self-absorption. Interestingly. So when people are really focused on their own issues and making that comparison with what they see on social media, they're kind of losing the opportunities to them be able to grow themselves because they're in this cycle of comparison and not really thinking about what they can do in order to further themselves. They're just using someone else's level of completion or success as a metric for themselves. And it's really important, like you mentioned, Alice, that you recognize that it's just a snapshot of what someone is sharing online and it's not necessarily the whole story. So the most important thing to do is to tap back into yourself, to open yourself up to new opportunities, places, and people, and saying yes to yourself rather than what you think other people will say yes to.
Yes, absolutely. And when you were talking about that, I had another thought about how you only see you when you hear stories, and this is what Brene Brown also talks about pretty frequently. You hear the story, the beginning and the end. You don't really quite see the middle. And when you hear stories of like, oh, this has happened to me. I was going through a divorce. I was, heartbroken. I was down on the ground. I was beaten up, all these things. And then I rise up and I'm brave and I'm successful. Where's the middle part? The middle part is not visible. And you have to acknowledge, you have to understand the middle part is messy, but it's so important. It's where the most growth happens. And we have to embrace all of these time that's just like with ourselves, with our own growth, with all the discomfort that comes with it to get to the other part. Don't beat yourself up for not having that success story because it didn't seem like, oh, well, that person could do it. Then why couldn't I do it? I'm not worthy or something. It's just because they don't share the messy, painful middle part that they had to go through. I just really want to encourage everybody to embrace the journey and just trust the process and like give yourself so much love and just like pat yourself in the back for being so brave, being alive every day.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about the different phases of the moon and how that is really representative of this cycle of growth. And you think about the beginning is so exciting and you set these intentions and you're really jazzed about whatever it is you're ready to do. And you kind of get into this first quarter phase and it starts to wane. You start to, well, in the terminology of the moon, it starts to wax, right? But you kind of get to this point where you now realize all of the nitty gritty steps that need to go into then fulfilling whatever it is your goal is. And by the time of the full moon, sometimes you have maintained that energy, but a lot of times it has stagnated or just petered off completely. And if you ever are able to see something all the way through and then share the finished product or the success of that journey, you feel amazing. But that nitty gritty middle part where you're embracing self-doubt and realizing all the work that goes in and the commitment that goes to actually making long-term change, it's not sexy and it's not something that people love sharing, but it's so necessary in order to do the work. And really the work happens in those tiny little moments with those tiny incremental steps on the way there. And so much of that has to do with you battling your own inner critic and your own ego stories telling you that you're not good enough or you don't have the skills for this or no one's going to like this, and consistently showing up for yourself. But you can only do that if you have a good relationship with yourself.
Absolutely. And if you ask anybody who's successful and, talk about their journey, they're going to tell you how much they had to change and adapt and give up and just like letting go of certain expectations and certain ideals to be able to get to where they're at. Whatever then the vision you have at the beginning, most likely not going to the end result, but the end result is the best result that it could happen. just understanding that you stick to your goals, you stick to the frequency, this reality that you want to happen, but be flexible about how you get there, and understanding that a lot can happen in the middle part, and just embrace all of those changes and just go with the flow and trust your instincts.
What else do you want to talk about when it comes to being alone, or this idea maybe of aloneness versus loneliness?
We did kind of talk about that last time when we hung out. People tend to equate alone time with loneliness, because when you're not around other people, if you're not comfortable being by yourself, you might feel very uneasy and lonely, and you probably need stimulations. For a lot of people, they do need stimulations. And I like the fact that you were mentioning earlier about like just fulfilling all the needs you have for yourself. If you need stimulation, stimulate yourself with, a book, with watching an interesting show, with diving into thought experience. There's so many things you can do to stimulate yourself without other people's presence, and not feeling like you need to have company for things to be meaningful. Your experience do not need to be seen for it to be meaningful. You don't have to take a snapshot of what you're eating and post it on social media for it to be a good meal. Those are just sort of examples. But I think there are some negative connotation and some stigma that goes with being alone or being isolated. We need to be aware of that, and we need to let go of any sort of cognitive distortions when it comes to being alone, being by yourself.
A very special woman once said to someone very special to me that if you are bored, you are not creative. And that really stuck with me, because you can view time by yourself as time you're missing out from other things, or you can view it as a chance to really get to know yourself and what you're capable of. So the Nine of Wands just came out, and it was also reversed. So there's some stuff going on here. Whenever I get a lot of reversals, I always look at it reversed and see what the messaging is. And then I flip everything right side up and imagine what it could be if I wasn't at that stagnated point, or this message wasn't coming through as clear. What would it be like if it was back as a upfront card? So the Nine of Wands generally has to do with like perseverance and getting sort of to the end of your goals. But when it's reversed, there's a little bit of like stagnation and like tentativeness. So it could be fears that are trying to protect you from moving forward, making sure that you're staying in your comfort zone. It could be that you are unwilling to make that step because you're afraid of being seen, and you're afraid of being judged potentially for whatever this growth is that you're going through. It could be that you feel trapped by something that is outside of you. You can tap within to find those skills to bring you to the next level, or you can tap into someone else to help you get to that next level. Because for every person who is going through whatever stage of growth they're going through, there's someone who's already done it. And it's really nice to be able to find that community of other creators who can maybe just point you in the right direction. So I do encourage people that when they see someone who like really looks like they have their shit together, maybe just tap into them and see if they would be willing to chat with you about some ways that they were able to get through. You can turn this card right side up and have it be this card of you're almost there, you're at this last step. You just need to find that creative and motivated drive from within.
I just learned something as you were talking about the reverse cards. The reverse cards are like the retrograding planets in astrology. And I just started making that connection. It's just like the inverted energy. It's like not direct. There's just like 3 steps forward, like 4 steps back sort of thing. Like it's especially if you have like Jupiter in retrograde in your own chart, like your ability to find abundance is like so indirect. Like, oh, I'm like trying so hard to find that. So I just make that connection with the reverse cards with the retrograde planets. But anyways, it's totally side note. But I love the fact that you brought up boredom and creativity. I work as a therapist, and a lot of times I deal with younger people who's still growing, and a lot of parents tend to fill them up with activities. We're going to do karate, and we're going to do piano, and we're going to just fill the day up with everything possible. Or if they don't have activities, then they just have a ton of toys. Play with this toy, draw. I don't know. They just dictate everything the kid does instead of allowing the kid to make their own decisions and just like trust what they want to do, listen to what they feel intuitively and want to do. And I do this with my kid. I kind of allow him to just free play. Free play is so important. It is so underrated. I'm sitting here. What do I do with myself? Right. And when you start developing these skills, you start developing these habits of like acknowledging that I'm understimulated right now. How do I go about utilizing this time more effectively and more fulfilling for myself? Sometimes it could be like, oh, I think I want some company, and that's perfectly fine. But some other times you can explore things creatively, go to another world with a book, just treat yourself like how you want to be treated.
I just made the connection as you were talking about the idea of a loss of imagination in childhood, because just like you said, when kids are so overbooked and overstimulated, they never get a chance to imagine. And I always ran into that problem when I was teaching middle schoolers, that I felt like school really just like was the nail in the coffin to imagination, because school was so structured. And then right from school, kids would, exactly like you said, go to piano and then go to swimming. Then they'd have to do homework, and there was no time for them to ever imagine. So for any of us who may have had childhoods or the majority of our lives that has just been scheduled, we have been out of the practice of using our imagination. And that alone time is the chance for your imagination to run wild. That's why people say something like, I have this pipe dream one day where I'm going to open up this treatment center for kids in the woods, and it's going to be beautiful. And I say, what is preventing you from doing that? And they're like, I need a lot of money for it, or I need, partners. And that immediate sense of it's not going to happen is what we've been conditioned to feel, because we haven't let our imaginations run wild. And I wish that everyone can think about their wildest dreams and allow their brains to just run with that. Because I know you and I have talked a lot about this idea of manifestation, where if you dream it and you think really big, you can work backwards to think about, well, what's the first step that I would need to get there? Okay, did that first step go through? Great. Let's try the second step. And you can eventually work towards it. And maybe you don't get to your ultimate dream, but you could get somewhere close to it. And that feels so much more enriching than just saying, nah, that's a pipe dream for another time. There is no other time. It's now or never. And our imaginations have been stifled. They have been cut off. They have been demonized. And we are just trying to get back to a point of allowing that to happen, so that way we all can live the most fulfilled lives we can.
Oh my gosh, I do the same things to people when they start talking about their visions to me and like, oh, this is the restaurant that I want to open, or this is, the company that I want to run. And I always ask them like, well, why aren't you running it? What are you doing with this vision? Like, this is what your heart's telling you. Imagination and intuition have such a strong bond and connection. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. And I'm kind of do like a segue about creativity a little bit. I read this book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I loved the book. What she was talking about in the book was this idea that inspiration and creativity comes to you as invitations. They knock on your door and they're like, this is your opportunity. I see you as a strong fit for this particular view or for this particular vision. And I want to encourage you, like, play with me, make me into a reality. If you take on the inspiration, if you take on that vision and you make it happen, then that's yours. Like, how many times have you seen a product out there, you were thinking in your head like, I had that idea before, and we're saying like, well, yeah, because you didn't take on it, so it moved on to other people and knocked on other people's door. And whoever had the courage to take on the responsibility to make it a reality, then they get to claim the product or the, the ideas. And I love to talk about how we can seduce more of this. I love that, in Big Magic, like she was saying, like, you got to seduce these big ideas, you got to seduce creativity to come to you so that it could fill you up and become your reality. Did you pull a card?
I did. The Princess of Wands came out, shocker, reversed. She is all about freedom to fail and learning experiences, which we've talked about before. It's this idea of normalizing failure as a part of the process, recognizing that whenever, like you said, you see something that has come to fruition, you know that that product or that idea went through 100 iterations before it actually made it to that point. Normalizing this idea of, I'm going to play with this and I'm going to see what happens with it. And if I don't receive good feedback or it's not working in whatever way, allowing that to not be the deterring factor for you continuing on this journey. It's really, really important that we throw ideas against the wall and see what sticks. Like, that is a part of the process, and experimenting is a part of the process, and not allowing yourself to be fearful of that potential rejection or failure is so necessary. The other part that relates back to this alone part is what we do when we do experience these ideas of rejection and failure is sitting with yourself and reminding yourself that it's not a reflection of who you are as a person. It's a reflection of whatever is going on in the world at that time that led to this not working out. When we don't internalize rejection and failure, we can use it as a learning opportunity to then move on to the next stage of our process.
That is so beautiful. I got goosebumps just like it coming out so perfectly with what we were talking about. But yeah, I wanted to dive into this process of like this internal dialogue you have with yourself. Like you were mentioning, when you are alone, because a lot of people do not like to be alone because of the possibilities of where the thoughts and the feelings are going to take them. And I think that as a practical approach, I wouldn't overwhelm yourself with a lot of alone time. I would just do it a little bit at a time. If you were playing around with ideas, if you were trying to heal from something, if you're doing shadow work, start small and build up your tolerance, and absolutely listen to your body and your intuition, and listen and observe, not to judge. Because, as you were saying, like, yeah, you're going to sit with those feelings, you're going to sit with those thoughts, and then you're going to start reflecting on why you're feeling those things and not necessarily blaming it on yourself or other people. Listen to how your body start responding to different stimuli, because your body's like the oldest, wisest, most reliable messenger between you and your intuition or your higher self. So trust your bodies. Sometimes we just ignore because it's like, oh, I'm being crazy, because we're being pressured, socially. If you feel confused about what to ask for, just ask little questions, like small questions, like, how does this feel? And sort of observing, okay, I am uncomfortable, but what is this discomfort? Is it fear, or is it too much excitement, or what kind of fear is it? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of committing? Are you afraid of failure or success? Are you afraid of being seen in general? What is it that you're afraid of? And start labeling how you feel. I love the word uncomfortable because it's so neutral. It's like it doesn't give blame to anything. I feel uncomfortable because this and that. I'm afraid that because of this and that. The story I'm telling myself is this and that. And start there. Your body's so wise, like it can tell you when something feels toxic or it's just uncomfortable because it's growth. So toxic or growth. I don't work out, and every time I do in any capacity, like if I go running, my body's gonna be like, oh no, we don't like this. We don't like this. My heart start pounding, like, it's harder to breathe, and it's like, oh no, we don't like this. This is why I don't run. Stop running. But running is important. Running is healthy for you. So like there are differences between the discomfort when it's toxic and the discomfort, when it's healthy. An equivalent example would be like when you eat a lot of greasy food and you're like, oh, I don't like this, but it tastes so good, but I don't like this. So knowing the differences is really important.
On the theme of asking questions of yourself, I pulled some cards ahead of today's recording in order to talk about this idea of how we ask questions of ourselves. So I tapped into the medicine of the hermit as a major arcana card, because that to me is the ultimate alone card. It's all about introspection, going into that cocoon in order to transform. So the three cards that came out as a response to the hermit really answered three different questions in my mind. The first one was the question, when do we need to be alone? And the high priestess came out reversed. She is ruled by the moon, which, as we know, goes through predictable phases and can really correlate with how your own cycles work in your, month to month. The time that we need to be alone is when we need to reconnect and rebalance our inner voices and our outer actions. It is so necessary to take the time to be still and tune into that innate wisdom. We really can't use the excuse anymore of being too busy, because this is the work. It starts within, and nothing else outside can happen until we tap inside. We can't look to external sources for answers. Everything is within. So we need to take that time to do nothing. It's really hard sometimes, but if you start with 5 minutes, like Alice was saying, it shouldn't be anything major. It's the same thing like working out. You don't want to go to the gym and try to deadlift 400 pounds. You're going to hurt yourself. You have to work up little by little. So start with 5 minutes of alone time and just think to yourself, or don't even think, try to quiet your mind and let that internal wisdom just come out. The second question that came out was what we can gain from alone time. And the emperor came out, who is ruled by Aries. This is the idea of gaining structure, stability, decisive action. It allows us to manifest our ideas. So going back to this idea of imagination, if you don't ever imagine, you can't ever manifest. We can then accomplish our goals and attract abundance because we know that we're following our inner wisdom to that outer action. This is what we need to do in order to move forward. Again, nothing happens from the outside in, it happens from the inside out. If you maintain self-discipline, you can control your emotions and make level-headed decisions, you'll be able to embrace that inner warrior to be able to take on whatever the fuck comes your way. And the last question is, what do we risk if we don't take this time? So if we continue in this unconscious state of just overstimulation and going from thing to thing to thing without ever tapping in, we get the 9 of Pentacles reversed. This is risking never defining what's important to you. We're unconsciously striving for more, but if we don't know why and we don't know what place that actually holds in our lives, then we're just going to continue to be unawake. It's really necessary to dive deep into our core values to change our mindset so we don't sabotage our intentions. So that's what we risk. And I think about the vision of the 9 of Pentacles. The imagery on this card for the Mystic Mondays Tarot is of a peacock. And you think of a peacock just being this beautiful, array of colors, and it's this gorgeous thing, but there isn't really any substance to it. So if we don't ever tap into our core values and see sort of what's behind the curtain, then it's going to be all for naught, because it's just this empty vessel of like a pretty thing without any substance behind it. So behind the facade, we can transform into our true colors, our splendor, and our inner vitality by staying true to ourselves, our visions, and therefore our quality of life will improve. All those things are at risk if we don't spend this time alone.
Oh, there's so much wisdom there. I love it. Those are really good advice to how to approach alone time. And I think those are really important questions that you asked. And I feel like we have more clarity now with what, how we can justify or how we can philosophize, our time with ourselves, the time with our wisdom. Let's call it that. The time with our wisdom, our inner wisdom. I wanted to echo this idea that you mentioned earlier about how everything's presented to you is mirroring what you need to see in yourself, and not to take them as some sort of punishment or some sort of agenda or something that the world's doing to us, but it's more about what we can do better, what we need to learn about ourselves. So if you meet somebody who's has more of a narcissistic tendency, who is asking a lot more from you than giving, then it's not that you're the narcissist here, but like the realization could be that you are probably giving more than you can and you're breaking yourself for someone else's need. And like tying in it to like the earlier when we talked about the importance of alone time is, you know, especially like single parents or like people who've been in really, really long-term relationships who've pretty much been with other people a lot of times, the necessity of having your own space and having your own time. And, you know, a lot of times what happens is you don't have a lot of alone time because you are prioritizing someone else's need above your own, and understanding that alone time is a need and you have to make time for that. Because like we, you know, with the cards and how they played out as CJ was explaining it, like this is, you're risking not reaching that potential, you're risking not living your life because you're living someone else's, or you're living for someone else.
That resonates really deeply with me as an educator. And that's part of the journey that I am embarking upon by having left the classroom, is helping educators regain that balance and tapping back into who they are as joy-filled individuals who just happen to also be supporting other people in their learning. Because too long, teachers have been viewed as robots, right? Like if you saw a teacher in the grocery store, you were like, what the fuck is this person doing outside of their classroom? Like they're a real person. Ew. I want to change that mindset of like, yeah, of course I'm a real person who like goes to barbecues and, you know, cooks for myself and does all these things that like a normal person does. And it's just so easy to be a teacher and then to grade and then to, you know, stuff your face and watch some TV and go to bed and then repeat it. And you never get a chance to evolve past that. And for people who are in other caregiving professions, it's the same thing. You feel the need to give up yourself in order to take care of someone else. And my mission in starting this new venture is to reclaim who we are first, so then we can show up to other people as our full selves, which is doing everyone a service. We're all doing each other a disservice by not showing up as our authentic selves. And we're never modeling what it looks like to be a healthy, fulfilled individual. I was talking recently with a couple different people about being in my mid 30s and looking like I'm in my late 20s. And a lot of that is because I don't have children and I just take care of myself. But so much of what I was modeled as a kid, just from adults that I had been around, was people who were parents and who were overexhausted and weren't taking care of their bodies. And I never really saw like the example of a functional middle-aged person who also was taking care of themselves without like sacrificing anything else. And to be able to kind of be something that I hadn't really seen, it's refreshing. But it's also like other people are like, wait, you can do that? Like you can be in your mid 30s and take care of yourself? And I challenge everyone at whatever age to really think about who they are as a complete individual, so that way they can show up as that to everyone else.
Yes, and you don't know the impact you have just showing up authentically until somebody later might tell you that you've been their inspiration. And it's sort of something that I've experienced frequently. And I'm always just been pretty comfortable just being myself. And that a lot of times have put me away from a lot of groups of people, not knowing that I actually had made an impact until years later when they message me and they're like, I've always admired your ability to just be who you are and your courage and, you know, to do what you do. And that made my day, you know, and just I want to encourage everybody to just to do it, you know, and not worry about what other people might think. We need more people who are authentic, because then we all get to be authentic together.
That's sort of the mission of this podcast, is that you and I have both taken the time to really work on ourselves, and we've been able to connect in a way that is very authentic and very deep that I think a lot of people are reluctant to do. They're reluctant to kind of show that inner vulnerability and those inner thoughts and feelings. And we just encourage people to take the time to go through the work so that you can show up as yourself, because everyone is happier as a result, especially you.
Yeah, I think it's also important to realize and to keep in mind that only when you're authentic and only when you spend time with yourself and take care of yourself and doing all the things that you would want to be done to, or embracing and living and embodying the reality that you want to happen, that's when all the reality is going to be attracted to you. That's, you know, a lot of attraction. I'm sure a lot of people have read about it. But like I've sort of taken this idea to the next level. Like sometimes by myself, it's probably going to sound a little bit out there, but I have taken time to appreciate myself on different levels, you know, and giving myself a lot of affirmations. You know, when things get hard, I just tell myself, you know what, you're brave for showing up today. And that was a really hard thing to deal with. And I'm sure some people also had a difficulty with it. And we'll try again tomorrow. Just giving yourself so much love and, you know, feed yourself what you would feed a child, if that makes, I mean, not actual children's food, but like, you know, if that makes sense, like nutritious food and like drink water and put some petals of flowers in your bath. Like just treat yourself like royalty, because when you start treating yourself like royalty, you're going to become royalty in reality. Like just take yourself on dates. Sometimes when I do any sort of spiritual work, when I start manifesting things, I sometimes wear things or not wear things that would make me feel really good about myself. You know,
You saying you do spiritual work naked. It's okay, Alice. You can let us know that.
I actually do. A lot of times I pull cards naked. I read astral charts naked. Sometimes I just meditate naked. And it's just like we get so tied up with the material world that we've sort of forgotten who we are as the core. We're souls. Just these bodies are temporary. Getting grounded, like I love this idea of just sitting on the grass and touching the ground and just be with nature, because there's so much more to us than just the society that we see. This is just a giant group of one species, and you have so much more in the world that you can tap into. Sometimes I find that if I wear something too confining, I feel uncomfortable reaching for anything that's beyond, you know, the material world. And sometimes, yes, I do hang around naked. And that's been very liberating. And I've been able to actually manifest a lot of things because I embrace everything that I have. And I embrace my alone time and I embrace the space. I take up the space that I'm given.
I love that. And I think that that's such a good metaphor for just everything we've been talking about, which is the idea of like our bodies being where all of our answers are. And if we don't ever see our bodies or let our bodies see the light of day, we risk always sort of having that veil over us. I also love to hang out naked. I'm glad that we have that in common. And I think that honestly, like being naked metaphorically by revealing your emotions and that vulnerability is huge. But like you said, the body is temporary and it also gives you all the answers you need. So if you're able to see yourself naked, you can actually see yourself and who you are without feeling that shame around your body that we have been, particularly as women, conditioned to feel. It is super liberating to say, you know what? This is my body. It is the best it's ever going to be at this moment because I've done everything up until this point to support it. And it could be I don't work out, and so I have a couple extra pounds around my booty. Hey, someone is going to like looking at that booty in pants. I like the way that booty looks in pants. So don't worry about it. It is perfect exactly the way it is. And if you are on the other end of the spectrum and you do a lot of things to take care of your body in terms of what you eat and how you rest and hydrate and everything, then your body is perfect because you've tended to it that way. But everyone along the spectrum is exactly perfect where they are. It just needs to be embraced so that way it doesn't feel like such a taboo and it doesn't feel like you don't have that connection to your body.
That is such a beautiful takeaway from that. Thank you for supporting my idea.
All right. Well, what are you grateful for today, Alice?
Oh man, I am grateful for my journey. I'm grateful for loyalty and support and loving relationships. I am grateful for efforts that I've put in as well as others put in. And I'm grateful for our listeners because I get to have these conversations with you and sharing these things because we do have people listening to us.
I am also grateful for the wisdom that comes from within and having challenging opportunities that have forced me to do that. But I would not trade those challenging opportunities for the growth that I have, to not have had those challenging opportunities for the growth that I've gained. Like, it's been so worth it. And I am grateful for, similarly, anyone who's listening who has just had that little spark of, oh, maybe I'll sit for 5 minutes today and just see what that does, because practice of returning to yourself, that is so valuable, and it will change your life over time. It might not feel like it, but if you continue to work on yourselves, I know that you'll be able to show up more authentically. And then we will love to hear your stories of growth as you go through this journey.
Thank you so much for listening.
This week's tangible takeaways. Alone time is time to reconnect with yourself, your intuition, and your inner wisdom. Many of us are overscheduled and overstimulated, so we never take the time to just be with ourselves. It may feel scary to listen to our bodies, but it is necessary in order to regain imagination and then to attain manifestation. The abundance of reversals in this week's tarot polls are indicative of society at large not yet attaining the next step in our collective healing journey. So let's use this to inform our choices moving forward. Take 5 minutes today to sit and focus on your breathing. Let that insistent voice fade into the background and see what comes up for you. If it's hard, that's okay. Fits and starts are a part of the process. Imagine how it would feel to be guided by your inner knowing rather than outer influences. We promise your authentic life is waiting for you on the other side.
When looking at your astrological chart to understand better how to work more constructively with alone time, pay close attention to your 12th house energy, the planets in your 12th house, the house ruler, which is the planet that rules the sign at the cusp of the house, and any aspects to it to get the full picture. The 12th house represents the internal psychological world, hidden realms, isolation, meditative state, spiritual practices, mental health. It also represents self-destructive habits, hidden enemies, secrets, and delusions. It is what happens right before the sun rises, before things manifest in the material realm and are seen by the world. It has the power of the reset button. It is the house right before your first house of identity, sense of self, and physical appearance. People with heavy 12th house energy can feel and see hidden things, and many take on the burdens themselves and forget that there is so much magic they can tap into as well. Tending to your 12th house energy with acceptance, compassion, and embrace will better assist you in your time alone and in your manifestation journey. Own the 12th house energies so that it doesn't own you. That means making time for it and taking every chance of alone time as an opportunity to recalibrate your spiritual antenna and deepen your relationship with your intuition and your higher self. Celebrate your gifts and your existence to fully show up as exactly who you are, because what the world needs right now is for you to authentically shine and be in your element. The weekly forecast for Monday, July 5th through Sunday, July 11th. Monday, July 5th. Get ready for some harmonious fun and unconventionality, as well as deep and transformative interactions today. There are favorable openings to connect on a more spiritual and soulful level with those around us. We are also presented with windows of opportunities for serious breaking of the mold and the license to express ourselves authentically. Show up, let yourself be seen, and allow others to do the same. Tuesday, July 6th. We will feel more energetic, cheerful, flirty, optimistic today, but watch for things sounding too good to be true. Enjoy the heightened social energy and allow that to fill your cup, but fact check and ask clarifying questions where you can. There might also be someone new coming into our lives, but don't get attached to ideals and stories we believe to be true. Be careful about falling in love with someone's potential and not who they are. Try not to make any overindulgent decisions that you might regret later. Wednesday, July 7th. This is a great day for getting things done and getting in the spotlight via knowledge sharing and cooperation. Today, we are allowed the space to express ourselves more authentically with words. However, confusion and mental distractions might be in the mix, so stay patient, talk slowly, and allow space for questions and clarifications. Thursday, July 8th. Today, we can expect luck and abundance to be on our side, as well as our ability to communicate and the harmony between logic and emotion to be enhanced. There might be some issues with power, control, resistance, and manipulation, but as long as you communicate effectively and stay open-minded about the methods by which you use to get your goals, compromises can allow for everyone to get what they want. Friday, July 9th. Happy new moon in Cancer. This is a new beginning with pleasant surprises in the cards for us. This new moon is at 18 degrees of Cancer, which is associated with the Three of Cups tarot card. Set your intention for reunions, celebrations, for opening up portals to deeper understanding and transformation, connections with spirituality, creativity, for breaking throughs and rising up above limitations. This is an excellent lunation for tapping into your inner wisdom and powers and allowing them to bring your vision to life. Saturday, July 10th. Today, there will be a deeper and more intense pull for going beyond the material world for comfort. If you can, allow space and time for rest, creative exploration, and meditative pursuit. Take a break from getting caught up in the mundane drama, unplug, and take a safe trip somewhere you can be better connected with spirituality, whether literally or figuratively. Sunday, July 11th. This might feel like a more uncomfortable day with our desire to express ourselves authentically being suppressed or dimmed by fear, judgment, or self-consciousness. Mood swings are also possible, especially late at night, so remember to ride the waves of emotions, acknowledge them, and not let them define this moment for you. Stay present, take a shower, go for a walk, practice gratitude. If you are interested in more daily transit interpretations, guidance on your own astrological chart, getting advice on relationships based on astrology, and more, you can find me on Instagram at truth.told.early. I've also recently released a comprehensive monthly manifestation journal with daily forecasts for the month of July, which is now available on Etsy, also under Truth Told Early. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to let us know if you have any questions, any comments, anything about what was discussed and what you want to be discussed, and we would love to hear from you. Until next time.
You can reach us at celestialsmalltalk@gmail.com, on Instagram at celestialsmalltalk, and on YouTube under Celestial Smalltalk. Please listen, like, review, share, grow, learn, and love.